Pack your stuff and get out. If you ever show up at my house again, you'll be rolling down the stairs." Blake Harrison stared at the legal documents scattered across the kitchen table, his hands trembling as he read the same lines for the third time. Vincent Coleman's signature sprawled across the bottom of his mother's will, a will that left everything to his stepfather and nothing to the son who had called this house home for 15 years. The funeral flowers still wilted in the living room vases. Linda Harrison had been buried just 3 days ago, and already Vincent was wielding papers like weapons. Blake's throat tightened as he remembered his mother's final weeks, how she'd grown increasingly anxious whenever Vincent entered her hospital room, how she'd whispered apologies that made no sense at the time. Vincent's voice cut through his thoughts like broken glass. The older man stood in the doorway, his expensive suit immaculate despite the grief that should have consumed him. Instead of sorrow, Blake saw something else in those pale eyes: satisfaction. 24 hours, Vincent repeated, his tone carrying the weight of finality. "That's more than generous, considering you have no legal claim to anything here." Blake's chest burned with rage and disbelief. This man who had married his mother 7 years ago, who had smiled and played the perfect stepfather role, was now erasing 15 years of Blake's life with a single document. The house where he'd graduated high school, where he'd brought his first girlfriend, where he'd nursed his mother through her illness, all of it meant nothing. The next morning brought no clarity, only a deeper sense of betrayal. Blake found himself in the garage, boxing up tools his real father had left behind, tools Vincent had never touched but apparently now owned. Each clang of metal against cardboard echoed his growing fury. Rachel Martinez appeared in the garage doorway, her neighbor's concern evident in her furrowed brow. She'd known the family since Blake was a teenager, had watched Linda deteriorate over the past months. Her presence offered the first comfort Blake had felt since reading those documents. "Something isn't right about this," Rachel said quietly, glancing toward the house where Vincent's silhouette moved behind curtains. "Your mother loved you more than life itself. She would never leave you with nothing." Blake's hands stilled on a wrench his father had taught him to use. Rachel's words sparked something dangerous in his chest, not just anger, but purpose. He'd been so overwhelmed by grief and shock that he hadn't questioned the impossibility of his mother's decision. Vincent had controlled every aspect of Linda's final months, from her medications to her visitors. He'd insisted on handling all legal matters, claiming he wanted to spare her the stress. Blake had been grateful then, focused entirely on his mother's comfort. Now those considerate gestures took on a sinister cast. The pieces began arranging themselves in Blake's mind like a puzzle he'd been too heartbroken to see: his mother's sudden reluctance to discuss the future, Vincent's insistence on private meetings with lawyers, the way Linda's eyes had filled with tears whenever Vincent mentioned taking care of everything. Blake's investigation began with Linda's medical records. As her healthcare proxy, he still had access to information Vincent couldn't hide. What he discovered in the pharmacy logs made his blood run cold. During her final month, Linda had been prescribed powerful anxiety medications, drugs that could cloud judgment and memory. The prescriptions all bore Vincent's signature as the requesting family member. Owen Miller, Blake's friend since college and now a paralegal, met him at a coffee shop downtown. The documents Blake spread across their table told a story of systematic manipulation. Owen's face darkened as he traced the timeline with his finger. "Look at these dates," Owen muttered, his legal training evident in how he organized the papers. "Your mother signed the new will just 2 days after starting the strongest dose of these medications. And here, Vincent became her power of attorney the same week." The original will, the one Blake remembered his mother discussing years earlier, had split everything equally between her son and husband. Vincent had somehow convinced a medicated dying woman to rewrite her final wishes. The betrayal cut deeper than Blake had thought possible. But Owen found something else in the medical records, something that transformed Blake's grief into cold determination. Linda had been lucid enough during her final days to request her own medical files, a request the hospital had noted but never fulfilled due to her rapid decline. She'd been trying to understand what was happening to her mind. Vincent had stolen more than money and property. He'd stolen Linda's final chance to protect her son, her ability to make decisions with a clear mind. Blake felt something shift inside him, a transformation from grieving stepson to someone capable of justice. The judge's decision came down like a hammer of justice. Vincent's manipulation of Linda's mental state invalidated the coerced will, restoring the original document that split the estate equally. But the ruling went further. Vincent was ordered to pay Blake's legal fees and faced potential criminal charges for elder abuse and fraud. Blake stood outside the courthouse, breathing free air for the first time in months. Vincent emerged moments later, his expensive suit rumpled, his face aged by the weight of exposed shame. Their eyes met across the courthouse steps, and Blake saw not anger but emptiness, a man who'd destroyed his own life chasing money that was never truly his. The house felt different when Blake returned. The rooms that had echoed with forced silence during Vincent's occupation now hummed with possibility. He found his mother's hidden jewelry box, the one she'd mentioned in confused whispers during her final days. Inside, along with her wedding ring from Blake's father, was a handwritten note in Linda's careful script. "If something happens to my mind, trust your heart. You are my greatest achievement, and this house is your inheritance of love, not law." Blake understood then that his mother had known what Vincent was doing, had fought it as long as her medicated mind allowed. The note was her final act of protection, a message that transcended legal documents and exposed hearts. Vincent's creditors seized his remaining assets within weeks. Blake learned he'd fled to another state, leaving behind only debt and the wreckage of his schemes. Justice had been served not through revenge, but through truth, the most powerful weapon against deception.